We have about 89 days maybe away from the November election. Michigan definitely a battleground state. The political scene here is heating up. Documenting it all is Zahra Ahmad. She is with MLive. So much to talk about. I have to tell you, it has to be an exciting time to be a reporter covering all these issues here in the state of Michigan.
Yeah, definitely. It's great to be a reporter right now. I think this election time is always exciting for reporters, and it's a good thing we are trained to be versatile.
Tell us a little bit about, there are so many things going on. How do you prioritize what's getting covered and how to cover it?
Yeah, so luckily I work with an amazing team at MLive. So we have a few statewide reporters that are reporting on politics, and usually, since I'm new to the statewide team, I'll pick up what they need. I primarily focus on the Secretary of State and things that have to do with that part of the election. So absentee ballots is something that I have been reporting on thoroughly. And then right now I'm helping Emily Lawler, who is known for being an amazing political reporter. She's working on the AG's decision to move forward with the lawsuit against the UPS. Or USPS, despite other states kind of backing down after they announced they would not be making changes prior to the election.
How do you keep up on everything? Because it is changing not only day by day, but hour by hour as we head into the November election. How important do you think the state of Michigan is going to be for the presidency?
I think the state of Michigan is always huge when it comes to presidential elections. In 2016, we saw how that played out. And I think just by watching DNC and keeping up with things on Twitter, it's still going to be prioritized. My coworker, Malachi Barrett, has been reporting on that extensively. And he has a story coming out today explaining why Biden believes that Michigan is still one of those states that the Democrats really have to focus on. My tip for keeping up on all things politics is just follow a bunch of reporters, political reporters, especially from different news outlets on Twitter. Social media has been such a great tool during this pandemic because people are out there putting information out there. And most of the time you'll get your information from a reporter that's breaking on Twitter before it even hits the press. So that would be my number one suggestion, is just get on Twitter and follow all of your local reporters because they know exactly what's going on.
We are in the middle of the Democratic National Convention. Michigan really getting a lot of love out of the DNC. Have you been watching it and the virtual convention? Is it working? Is it not working? What are your thoughts on that?
Right on. So I'm going to be completely honest with you. I have been watching basketball playoffs instead of the DNC, but like I said, I will get on Twitter and watch all the highlights because I follow all these amazing journalists like Malachi Barrett, Emily Lawler, any from different outlets. That's usually what I keep up on. But yeah, there've been some laughs on the DNC. I'm sure that you have seen the Governor Whitmer Shark Week reference. But it also gets down to the nitty gritty, which is just how serious these politicians are taking their speeches and trying to move their agenda forward as it relates to the presidential election. So everybody's kind of keeping an eye on Michigan. We've had an incredible response to the coronavirus. We've made headlines just for that, also with the virus and how harshly it impacted us at the beginning and how we're kind of wavering out of it. But yeah, everybody's kind of turning to us, and it's an interesting time to live in Michigan, that is for sure.
Zahra Ahmad with us. She is a policy reporter at MLive with us on the Oakland County Megacast. And Zahra, you recently wrote about election lessons that were learned in the primaries, but in this complicated situation that we're in with the coronavirus, with increased absentee ballot usage, and so on and so forth. With the general election expecting even more record turnout, what changes do you expect to be either put in the works by the Secretary of State or being negotiated by the Secretary of State and other powers that be to make the November elections that much smoother?
Sure. So right now we just went through the primary and there were over 10,000 ballots that were rejected. They were absentee ballots. I want to clarify that were rejected. And about 6,405 of those ballots that were rejected were rejected because they came and they hit the offices after Election Day. They were postmarked for Election Day, some of them were, and they did not arrive. Did not arrive on time, so they could not be counted. Now, the League of Women Voters, they had a lawsuit pending. Well, it was in the courts for a while. It went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court didn't want to hear it, but they're essentially saying, it shouldn't matter when the ballot comes in. It should be counted if it's postmarked for Election Day or before Election Day. The Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, has been very vocal about a bill right now that is pending. I believe it's in the House, and it would allow clerks to count absentee ballots at least 2 days after arriving to their office if they are postmarked before or on Election Day. So that's one thing to be keeping an eye on. Of course, that's going to be up to the state lawmakers to see if that's going to be passed before November. Another thing to keep an eye on would be a bill that would allow clerks to start processing absentee ballots before Election Day. So after talking to several local clerks across Michigan, the biggest issue is that absentee ballots, it takes a while to process them. Clerks cannot open really the absentee ballots. Well, they definitely can't open them before Election Day. So 7 a.m. on Election Day is when they can actually start physically getting them together, counting them. And that's time consuming. And we heard it from the Secretary of State and clerks before the primary election that they expect results to be delayed because of the increased volume of absentee ballots. And of course, we saw that since 2018 when that right was expanded. So no reason absentee, you could just vote absentee if you chose to. We saw a huge increase in those absentee ballots, but with the pandemic, that just made it even more important for people to vote from home. So they're seeing record numbers, and it was a primary election. They saw those record numbers, so I'm expecting it to be even larger in the November presidential election. So that's another bill. And then the third one would require bills to contact voters if the signature of the absentee ballot doesn't match the one that's registered with the state. Now, of the 10,000 absentee ballots that were rejected, 80% were due to either them coming in late, so after Election Day, or because the signature didn't match or there were issues with the signature. So that would just make sure, right now clerks aren't mandated to check with people if the signatures don't match, but it would mandate clerks to do that. So it's just another precautionary effort that would ensure that the person's vote is counted. So those are three bills right now that are kind of just sitting there. If they get passed by November, it seems like clerks would be really ecstatic about that because it just helps with the process, but we'll see what happens.
I know that we have also talked at great length with several of the clerks throughout our area. It's been really hard for them to get poll workers during this time as well. In your coverage, did you see any issues with shortage of poll workers or polls not opening because they didn't have enough people to assist in that?
Yeah, so in Flint and Detroit, there were issues with some clerks not showing up. And so luckily, the Secretary of State had clerks on hand just in case that this would happen. So they had the clerks out there and things ran smoothly. But it seems like all of the issues that did occur, they were already anticipated by the Secretary of State, and so they were handled well. Now there is still an opportunity for people to sign up to help out with elections. This is primarily election workers. So, and I want to clarify, they weren't clerks; they were election workers that didn't show up. But yeah, so there is an opportunity. One thing that people are noticing, clerks are noticing, is that the older election workers, some of them have chosen not to work, which makes sense given their increased risk for catching COVID or the severity of COVID if they were, God forbid, to get it. So a lot of younger people and are signing up to become election workers, and that is still available. If you go to the Secretary of State's website, you can find out more information on that.
So I know that you mentioned that you were new. Prior to this, you were an investigative reporter, I believe, with the Flint Journal. If we could just shift a little bit and talk about the industry overall. What has the switch been like for you, and what do you think is going to be the future of journalism and your career?
Absolutely. So at first, at the start of this, I think everyone can agree that there was a lot of uncertainty, and because newspapers across the country have been hit so hard just in general over the last 2 years. A lot of journalists were nervous. We saw a lot of people having to take furloughs. The state mandated their employees to take furloughs, and we were wondering how it was going to impact us. I know that there were newspapers that were demanding at least a week of furlough every month or so. So luckily, my company, we only had to do 1 week of furlough. It wasn't bad at all. We were able to work out with unemployment. And honestly, the leadership at my company has just kind of shown their priority in reporting. So we've been able to get protocols down, navigating to reporting in terms of just contacting with people and talking with people at a distance hasn't been too bad. I did miss the interaction with, say, like city council and going to city hall and seeing the people that I normally see, but I've just been utilizing social media so much more in terms of trying to connect with people. And I think that is something that we needed to happen. So if there's any silver lining, it just goes to show you that like reporters can withstand really any changes, including working from home, which is great, which is really great. But in terms of the field of journalism, I think that this just goes to show you how important local reporting is, because the pandemic hit every area of the United States differently. And a lot of the issues were localized, you know, just because we were experiencing similar things doesn't mean that the changes around us were exactly the same. And local reporters really showed out. They've been keeping people informed with all of the changes as it relates to COVID, whether that has to do with the number of people having it, the number of people dying, all of the health risks, but also on an economic level, right? So how are your small businesses being impacted? How many small businesses are getting loans? What are your chambers doing? Stuff like that. So it's just been interesting. And obviously some of my favorite highlights are just profiling people that have gone through the impact of COVID, whether they had it or a loved one had it, and really just elevating their voice during all of this. Another aspect that we're kind of dealing with now is just schools and the uncertainty that surrounds that. We saw that MSU decided to go virtual, and I expect a lot of other colleges to start doing the same, just because it's a precautionary effort and a liability issue. But yeah, in terms of me, I miss my job at the Flint Journal, but I'm also loving my job now as a state policy reporter. It's been very interesting, and it's a great move forward. And for the future, I'm not totally sure. I'm studying, I'm trying to focus on environmental law and policy right now. And I'll see if I can specialize in that in a few years. But right now I'm digging what I'm doing, and it's been great.
Zahra Ahmad with us. She's a policy reporter at MLive with us on the Oakland County Megacast. And Zahra, one of the other elements that was voted into law by Michigan voters in previous years was the ability for members of the voting public to redistrict the House and Senate district lines. Commissioners have been randomly selected for that. How far along in the process is that commission in terms of forming and getting ready to work, and when can we expect to start seeing some results in drawing those new district lines?
Yeah, so they picked the commissioners on Monday. There are 13 commissioners. There is one person that's under the age of 30, 2 people that identify as Black, 1 identifies as Middle Eastern, and the rest identify as white. They are spread throughout the state, and they have to have their first meeting, I believe, before October 15th. I know it is sometime in October for sure. Right now, it's just kind of getting in contact with everybody and making sure that they have the availability to do so. They're required to have 15 meetings, I believe, before they, while they're serving. They're being compensated. Each of them should be receiving $40,000 for their efforts. And the redistricting is going to take place before the 2022 election cycle. So look forward to that. It sounds like it's going to take a while. It's going to take about 2 years to redistrict. They'll be having meetings and public hearings. All of their meetings have to be open to the public. So it seems like the public is going to have a huge role in how the state's going to be redistricted. And it seems to be like there's a lot of excitement around it. It's never happened before. And I believe that other states are kind of turning to Michigan again. Michigan's being spotlighted because it's so new. And I think Michigan's really going to set the example for how this process could go.
real quickly before we let you go, anything that you're working on that we should look out for? And also, do you want to share your social media so that people can start following you?
Sure. So I am currently working on a story again with Emily Lawler about AG Nestle's decision to move forward with the lawsuit against the USPS that should be coming out later today. I'm working alongside Malachi Barrett on a story about absentee ballot deadlines and how tight they are. Local clerks are really starting to feel the pressure just from the primary, and they know that the volume of absentee ballots as it relates to the general election is just going to be so much higher. So we are talking to clerks and getting their perspective, as well as postmasters, just about the tight deadlines and what they're anticipating with the issues with the mail, and where they could, I guess, like best practices would be the best way to say it. Just a heads up, a lot of clerks are saying try to mail your ballot in at least 2 to 3 weeks before the election, just in case, and monitor it online if you can. And then the story that I've been working on solo, and that is near and dear to my heart, is just how parents are dealing with sending their kids back in the areas that have been hit the hardest in Michigan. So those that have been hit the hardest, they just have a lot of decisions to be making, and they're very tough decisions because they saw just the immediate impact that COVID has had on their families. One person that I highlight specifically, he lost 12 people. He lives in the city of Detroit. He's lost 12 people that he knew, whether it was neighbors, friends, and or families, to the virus, and he has to make the decision of sending his daughter back. So we just highlight those decisions and try to get the parent perspective on everything, as well as some expert perspective. So like, what's the risk of sending, my elementary kid to school versus my high school aged kid? So look forward to that. And I will give you my social media. You can follow me on Instagram at ZEEE_M.A, or you can follow me on Twitter, which is, and is it terrible that I don't know my Twitter handle off the top of my head? So it's at AHMADZAHRA1M, and I'm pretty active on that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.